Sometimes you have to move on, and baseball is going to be moving on from ESPN.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever they're calling it these days, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Every once in a while, I'm at Sully Baseball on Blue Sky. Not that often, but mainly just contact me right here if you follow us on YouTube. I always read the comments, even the ones who don't like me. There you go. Let's go to the trivia question as we're doing this episode today. I asked what future all-star for a different sport was the starting third baseman on opening day for the 1981 Blue Jays. JRT Hughes on the Twitterverse wrote Danny Ainge was the starting third baseman for the 1981 Blue Jays. That's right. The future Celtic great, and also played a little bit with the Kings and the Trailblazers and the Suns. And he, helped build in the front office, helped build the Celtic team that won the 2008 NBA title. He was growing up in New England when the Celtics were gigantic in the 1980s. Danny Ainge was one of those just absolute, just great players on those wonderful Celtic teams. And yep, there he was as the starting third baseman for the Blue Jays. I gotta say this. I mean, I think that we need to have more of the playing different sports throughout the year, as opposed to like travel teams in the middle of the winter. You need to have that variety as in your athletic life. And I think it creates a more rounded athlete. I mean, I think when you see I see baseball players in high school. I'm a high school teacher, and I see that they're in Pasadena. There are some people doing like these travel teams in the fall and travel teams in the winter, and then some people are doing basketball all year long, and people are doing football all year long. So like, no, let's have the seasons again. Let's do things. It worked a little better. And I also think that that's no small thing for why we have so many pitching injuries, because you have people pitching all year long. And of course, the other thing is that the only thing they look for these days is velocity. But I digress. This is a little bit of me being like, oh, it was better in my day. And so maybe I'm being a little old man Sully here. But we're going to talk a little bit today about letting go of the past and sort of realizing when something becomes no longer relevant. I got a comment the other day asking me to talk about this. Amazing Eric 97 asked, Sully, are you going to talk about ESPN walking away from Major League Baseball after the 2025 season on a future episode? Well, I'm going to do it this episode. And was it ESPN walking away from Major League Baseball? Was it Major League Baseball walking away from ESPN? Was it mutual? Do both sides want to go their different ways? Rob Manfred gave a kind of a pointed and somewhat passive aggressive or maybe aggressive press release. He said, based on the foregoing, we and ESPN have mutually agreed to terminate our agreement. We do not think it's beneficial for us to accept a smaller deal to remain on a shrinking platform. Ouch. In order for the best position for MLB to optimize our rights going into the next deal cycle, we believe it was not prudent to devalue our rights with an existing partner, but rather to have our marquee regular season games, home run derby, wildcard playoff round on a new broadcast and or streaming platform. The Manfred gave some digs to ESPN there, but he wasn't wrong. I think that it's a situation where baseball has been part of ESPN and vice versa since 1990. And I think that the time has come to move on. We ESPN has become less and less relevant, and baseball needs to understand that clinging to a cable TV model is ridiculous. And you saw that, ESPN was offering less money. You saw that ESPN was not putting together a deal that was making Major League Baseball salivate. I understand that. Baseball has a right to try to get the best deal possible. And if it's no longer with ESPN, or if ESPN was taking baseball for granted, or for whatever reason, um, then it's time to sever ties and to try something new. Now, and the fact that the ESPN model and the ESPN influence is shrinking is just a fact. ESPN was a staple in our lives. I'm going to be 53 pretty soon. Jeez, I can't believe that. But ESPN was the hub of all sports for a big chunk of my life. It's no longer the case. And I've got to the point where I can't remember the last time I sat down and watched Sports Center. I can't remember the last time I watched Baseball Tonight. And the idea of the Sunday night game, which was a huge thing for a while, no longer is. And so, sort of renewing the contract is a little bit of clinging to the past in a way that is, I don't know, could be counterproductive, especially as we're seeing how we consume our media has changed so drastically over the last bunch of years. You used to have to see your highlights, you see the updates, you see the games and the players via ESPN, and that's why SportsCenter was so powerful for a period of time. Whatever story they put right up front was something that we all saw, because we all watched the SportsCenter and the personalities of SportsCenter, whether it was Olbermann or Chris Berman or Craig Kilborn or Stuart Scott, whoever it was. They were all part of Jack Edwards. They were all part of the people that we watched deliver our information. And the stars that we followed in all the different sports were all delivered to us from this platform. Well, that's not the case anymore. ESPN's relevancy is not there anymore. And think about how you're listening to me right now. You're listening to me on a device. You're watching this. It's specialized that I have the sort of the overview of the league. But if you want to listen to, just talk about the Guardians, Stacey Gotsulias talk about the Yankees, Jeff Carr talking about the Reds. Here on Locked On, you can completely cater your sports needs to individual teams, and that goes for all sorts of things. Different podcasts you watch, you can have it be that if your main team that you follow are the Spokane Indians, you can have it be that your device and everything like that is programmed to just give you all that information that you need instantly. So the relevance of ESPN is now gone. The ability to follow the teams exactly the way you want and to weed out all the other ones, well, that's also how the power of ESPN is no longer there. Putting the big star right up front, the lead story on SportsCenter, who cares? We make our own lead stories now. And the idea of the Sunday night game being a big, big thing, or the game of the week being a big, big thing, we can watch any game we want on our device, except, of course, the local games, because those are blacked out. Now, Manfred said that we have to take a look at other platforms and everything like that need to be, that baseball needs to explore. And they've had games on Amazon, and they've had games on Roku, they've had games on Apple. I'm going to be a broken record. I'm going to bring up some things I've said before, but ask yourself, baseball fans, when Have you once in the last few seasons checked your device, saw the game was going to be on Apple TV, and thought, oh, cool, it's on Apple TV? Baseball needs to do something. And if they're going to be breaking free of the past, they have to run full steam ahead into the future and streamline this whole process. I want baseball to make the best deals they can, but I also want them to get the most eyeballs they possibly can. And right now, I think we can all agree the whole streaming world is chaos. It's absolute chaos right now. You got your Netflix and your Amazon and your Roku and your YouTube TV and your Paramount TV and your Disney Plus and the this, that, and the other, and all the Hulu and all this stuff. You used to take cable TV and all that stuff. Well, on there, if you want to stick HBO or Cinemax or Movie Channel or Showtime, you could do that. The premium channels, but you had your basic cable stuff as well. Now you're getting all these subscription fees, you got all these things going around, and it's gonna be a bit much for all of us. Cutting the cord cutting that a lot of us have done. I've done. I don't have cable TV anymore. That's why I can't watch Dodger games in Los Angeles because those are still on cable TV. And I don't know how to install a VPN or anything like that. And the fact of the matter is, if it takes more than 2 steps to watch something, you're never going to get new eyeballs. But everything's all over the map. And it's really confusing. And if you're trying to get an audience of people to watch your product, you shouldn't be playing whack-a-mole. You shouldn't be playing hide and seek. Now, I understand they want to get the big deal from Apple TV or Roku or whatever the hell it is. But I can't make it any clearer. The MLB app that I have on my phone over there, you're going to have to trust me. My phone's over there. It's charging. The MLB app is fantastic. It's amazing. I can go like this, I can go like this, and I can listen to any game, including the Dodger games and the Angel games, as I'm here in Southern California. Those games are blacked out. I can't watch them on the device because they're blacked out, but I can watch any other team play. It's really smart. Make sure you make it really hard to watch the local teams. That's really smart there, baseball. But it's wonderful. If I want to watch, like last year I was doing Locked On A's, and I could watch any A's game I want as long as I wasn't in the Bay Area. When I was here in Southern California, I could watch any A's game. But I actually, since COVID, I've actually preferred listening to games. I really loved just the process of listening to the game on the radio and, or on the device and, following it that way, because baseball really is designed for, being able to listen to it. But they should have every game on there, including the Roku game, including the Apple Plus game, including if they were on ESPN, the ESPN game. They should have every game on there. And I've said this before, to paraphrase Don Barzini in The Godfather, we are not communists. Have that be like a subscription fee. Like your ultimate subscription fee is you get every game. And, if it costs more, we'll pay for it. The diehard baseball fans will pay for it. That all of the games on the same place. Where the hell is the game? It's right there on your MLB app, on the TV. I have all the streaming things that I subscribe to are on my TV. If I wanted to watch Netflix, I can go boom. If I wanted to watch Amazon, boom. If I want to watch the MLB app, boom. Except when it's on Roku, except when it's on Amazon, except when it's on Apple TV. Then suddenly it says, oh, you're blocked out. What do you mean I'm blocked out? I'm already paying a subscription fee. I'm already paying a subscription fee and I'm blacked out. I'll pay a higher subscription fee if it means I get to watch every game. And if you have people who are, older and get more confused by stuff, like what the hell is a Roku? If you pay that subscription fee that they always know the game is there, want to watch the Giants game, boom. I don't know why I picked the Giants, Mom. But that seems to be where everything's heading, right? That the streaming service will be through MLB, Where's the baseball game? It's on MLB. Where's the football game? It's on NFL. Where's the basketball game? It's on NBA. Things like networks. It's on ABC, CBS, whatever. That's all in the past. That's in the past. And acting, cutting yourself from ESPN makes a lot of sense. That's a link from the past. But let's completely embrace the fact that you have a great app and that people will pay for the subscription. And you could make some good dough on this and own it. And boom, where's the game? What do you mean where? It's on MLB. Why am I running all over the map to watch the game? Or having uploaded a VPN? Make it easy to get your product in front of people. And you can have different tiers of subscription, of course. But if you just super into your team, and in that, I'll pay for the Willie Mays subscription, highest tier. That's where baseball should be going to. Don't worry about, I struck a deal with this. You have the app. You have the place where it should exist. And in 10, 15 years, that's where everything's going to be. I want to watch the hockey. Where's hockey? NHL. I want to watch basketball. It's on NBA. I want to watch the WNBA. That's on the WNBA app. I want to watch the NFL. That's on the NFL app. Get ahead of the curve on that. Because that's where people's eyeballs will go. And you want to make it easy. What you don't want to say? I can't figure out where the hell the game is. Because guess what? Then we'll watch something else. Get rid of the blackout rules. Those are arcane. Those are ridiculous. Those are based on TV mentalities of the 60s. Which was, we're going to have if the stadium's not sold out, we'll black the game out so we have more people showing up there. It is 2025, okay? I'm no longer young. The only thing I'm young for these days is Alzheimer's disease, all right? And that the notion of blackouts stopped making sense in the 80s when Stop Making Sense came out. And so baseball put everything into that app. That's the future of it. So why not get there now and have it be that's our viewing habits? Our viewing habits are, we know exactly where it is. Let's cut out the confusion. Right now, there's chaos everywhere. Where the hell is this? Where the hell is that? Is this blacked out? No, it's over here and it's over there. Shouldn't be confusing people. You should be making it easy. And charging a subscription, you'll make money. And it will be easy. And it's also everyday content. There's new content. By the way, now that the tech world has taken over the entertainment industry, it's not just sports, it's movies, it's TV shows. They don't look at it as movies. They don't look at them as TV shows. They don't look at them as baseball games. They look at it as content. That's the big word. Well, you have daily new content that every day you put on your app. And that is how we are going to be consuming media all the time. So in the chaos of all the apps and all the streaming services, make it easy. Where's the ball game? It's at baseball. I mark the day and time. In 10, 15 years, all sports will just be on their freaking network apps. There won't be the CBS and ABC and NBC aren't even going to exist. All right. They're already fading out into the existence. All right. And we're going to start to see there'll be, where the hell is the game? You're going to have to make the process of how we consume things a little less confusing. And this day and age where everyone's a little on edge and everyone's a little just tense and nobody seems to like each other, and you need those things to give you comfort. That's what baseball can provide every damn day. And if you put it on here, this isn't even about like creating some sort of like, cornfield in Iowa idealism. This is for business too. Get ahead of the game. Back in the 30s, people thought it would be a bad idea to broadcast all your games play by play over the radio until a few teams did it. And they said, oh my God, we're getting so many new fans. Then they said, oh, but you can't put it on TV because then that'll kill your product. They put it on there, they got even more fans. Said, oh, we can't put it on cable TV because that'll alienate this and that and the other thing. And they found even new fans. Think about the effect of cable TV for people who didn't have a major league team but grew up watching the Braves on TBS. Or, as we'll talk about in segment 3, the effect that ESPN had. But now we've moved on to a different way of consuming things. Get ahead of the game there. Where's the ball game? It's on MLB. Start to cut the ties with the other places. Own your damn product. Create the subscription. And then, boom, make it easy for everyone to access it, and we will watch that content. Young, old, make it so where our eyeballs are. And charge the money because we'll pay for it. Because it's a lot of content. In the end, it will be really, really cheap. But yeah, it's time to walk away from ESPN. But that being said, before they do, we all have to give a big tip of the hat because the effect that ESPN had on baseball and how we consume baseball was seismic. Let's hear from our friends over at Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. I like the no shells variety. It's a perfect grab and go snack for busy days. I'm running around teaching my classes, doing my podcast. And if I just need a quick protein boost, it's always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, you got an in-shell option as well. Man, whether you're running between classes that you teach, you're dropping off the kids, you're doing your podcast, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. And Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids. Get snacking. Get cracking with a snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. So baseball is saying goodbye to ESPN and vice versa. But let's salute what ESPN did, how it changed everything. First of all, it's funny. When I used to consume SportsCenter a lot, and SportsCenter, they would kind of repeat. Remember, they'd have like 5 or 6 times in a row. It was usually the Stuart Scott, Craig Kilborn edition. They would play like 5 or 6 times in a row in the morning. And if I did a lot of shows on the road in the 90s, and I used to always have ESPN on in my hotel room. It was in the waiting room, and that's how we consumed our sports. And I seem to have a more balanced diet of my sports consumption because if you watch SportsCenter every day, yeah, I was focused mainly on baseball. But if they're showing football highlights up front, I'm gonna make note of the football highlights. Okay, that's Brett Favre. There's John Elway. Then obviously in the '90s when ESPN was king, you had all the Michael Jordan stuff and you had all the Tiger Woods stuff. Eventually, you had the rise of the Williams sisters, and you saw you were able to see more sports and be exposed to more sports than normally. I knew who Evander Holyfield was and all that was going on. I couldn't tell you who the heavyweight champion of the world is for $5 million right now. I don't know if I can name 3 NHL players or 10 NFL players. I like the NBA. I don't really follow it much anymore. But I used to just know things through osmosis because you'd watch SportsCenter and it exposed you to so many stars. You saw so many of the highlights. It's funny. I watched something on Amazon the other day. It's called the Russian Five, and it's about the Detroit Red Wings when they started bringing in Vladimir Konstantinov and all those stars coming over from Russia, and they wound up putting them together and getting to the Stanley Cup Finals. What was it, 3 out of 4 years, winning 2 of them, and of course the horrible car crash that made Konstantinov and put him in a wheelchair and everything. But I remember watching the documentary, and it's really moving, and it's really cool. But I'm like, yeah, I remember that. I remember that. I remember those Red Wing teams and some of those players on those teams and their really vicious rivalry they had with Colorado. I don't know anything now about the NHL because everything, as I said, everything is segmented. But think about what ESPN did, not just for our consumption of sports in general, but baseball. In 1990, everything changed. There was ways that we consumed baseball I started watching in the late 70s, all throughout the 80s. And my family moved from Massachusetts to California, and the only time I would ever see the Red Sox play is if they were on the game of the week on Saturday on NBC. But most of the time, you only saw the local highlights. And once in a while, the local news will show a highlight of this game or that game, but they mainly just listed the scores. Then in 19 and there would be the game of the week, and then you would see all the stars at the All-Star game, and then you would see them during the playoffs. And once in a while, you'd see something else. And you also had This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen, which is where you saw the highlights of all the other players. That all changed in 1990. ESPN took over Major League Baseball coverage, and that was the same time that CBS took over the rights of the playoffs. And CBS tried to do the game of the week the way NBC used to, but it was also a little all over the map. And CBS's coverage of the World Series, and they happen to have a couple of pretty darn good World Series and playoffs in the 1990s, including the 91 World Series, which is the greatest World Series I ever saw. And they also had classic moments like the Joe Carter home run, the Francisco Cabrera hit. But the real coverage of baseball was on ESPN. And they had Baseball Tonight, which was the show that was just baseball highlights. That to me was like, oh my God, I have like a full half hour or a full hour of nothing but baseball highlights and analysis. Wow. But you also had games that were on, and they were always on. Yes, cable TV had things like the Braves games, and sometimes you have the Met game, or if you're a cable package at WGN, you had Cub games. At WOR, you had Met games. And obviously the Brave games were all everywhere on TBS. But ESPN started showing multiple. It wasn't just one game of the week. There would be 2 or 3 games you get to see. Sunday night game, but there would be a game on Monday. There might be a game on Thursday. But they also had on Baseball Tonight live look-ins. The very concept of that in 1990 blew my mind, that I could be watching the highlight show and they could be going around the league. Hey, Canseco is up here. Oh, hey, look over there. There's Darryl Strawberry is up there, and they'd be able to go to the game, and you'd be able to see things live. And from the 90s right up until everything started being put onto devices, that was how you consumed it. And you watched all these games, and suddenly all of these stars weren't just people you saw in highlights. You could see them live. And you got to see Ken Griffey Jr. live. You got to see Barry Bonds live. You got to see Dave Stewart live. They would go live into a no-hitter. And there was a bunch of no-hitters in 1990, their first year there. There was a ton of no-hitters that were thrown. And then they got to do things like you got to see the Cal Ripken game where he breaks the record. Got to see that live. When the Giants and Braves were in this unbelievable pennant race in 1993, my father and I spent a lot of time together that summer. My father, may he rest in peace, was the greatest Giant fan you ever saw. And they went to live look-ins. The Braves were on TBS, but we could get live look-ins on the Giant game. So we were able to follow that great pennant race, not just after the fact, but as it happened. But there was also the great thing happens when you'd watch Baseball Tonight and you would see, okay, now we're going to see what happened in Red Sox Orioles. So you're watching the highlights, and you always knew it was the end of the highlight when their last highlight was always in slow motion. So if the Red Sox had the lead, I'm watching, oh, come on, give me that slow motion shot, and then you'd get it. Yes, they won. And they started showing playoff games when they expanded the playoffs. They had great coverage on ESPN for that. It was better than what they were showing on CBS. And baseball tried to do something called the Baseball Network, where they tried to do a partnership with NBC and ABC, and it fell flat on its face. And partly because ESPN was doing it so much better. And during the McGwire Sosa chase, ESPN was at the peak of its game. And remember, there was a great chase the year before where McGwire and Ken Griffey Jr. were both making a run at Roger Maris, and they came up short. But the next year, McGwire and then Sosa went on the chase, and watching those highlights on ESPN and doing the live look-ins was amazing. But what was also great was at the end of the year, the Giants and the Cubs both lost almost simultaneously. That forced a one-game playoff, and they would go back and forth between those two games. This may seem, if you were born in the 90s or came of age in the 90s, this was just how baseball was covered. But I can tell you, someone who came of age in the 80s, and I went to college in the 90s, that this was seismic. Being able to consume the product that way was it was the greatest. It was something I couldn't even dream of in the 80s, to then suddenly be able to have that much, what seemed to be instantaneous. Now it's more instantaneous. Now it's instantly being, you get an alert sent right to your phone. You can watch the games live on your phone. And so what what ESPN offered is no longer relevant. Just like This Week in Baseball, which was a staple, is no longer relevant. Just like ABC's Wide World of Sports is no longer relevant. ESPN is no longer relevant. And sort of clinging to it is sort of not acknowledging the reality that we've moved on in terms of how we consume our media and how we consume our sports and how we consume our baseball. But the way we're consuming our baseball right now is standing on the shoulders of the seismic changes done starting in 1990 when ESPN took over the coverage of Major League Baseball and changed it forever. And now it's evolved into something new. For a long, long time, Gillette had the cavalcade of sports, which included the World Series coverage. And that gave way, and that was the gold standard for decades. And then that gave way to NBC's Game of the Week and their coverage of the World Series, and Monday Night Baseball through ABC, which gave way to ESPN, and all built upon it. Now we have the ability to watch things instantaneously and enjoy it instantaneously. And if baseball's smart, it'll funnel it into one spot where we can all know exactly where it is and consume it that way. But you have to salute ESPN, even when you say goodbye, even when you say, yes, it is a shrinking platform because it's based on the cable model. But just like we have to acknowledge what Blockbuster did in terms of how we consumed our movies on VHS and on DVD until it eventually became irrelevant, you have to acknowledge what it did. All these things, you have to acknowledge the shoulders that our current understanding of media stood upon. So ESPN, every baseball fan should salute you for decades of providing us some of the greatest baseball highlights we've ever had, some of the greatest consumption of great, great baseball games. But now it's time to move on. And if MLB is smart, and they're usually not, they would put it all in one spot and then watch the game continue to grow. Which brings us to today's trivia question. The MLB draft, which is shown on MLB Network, began in 1965. And famously, Rick Monday was the first ever player chosen in the draft. Here's a trivia question. Who was the first ever future Hall of Famer picked in the draft? And I'll tell you, in that first draft in 1965, there were 3 future Hall of Famers drafted in the original 1965 draft? Who was the first future Hall of Famer ever drafted? It was in the 1965 draft. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever they're calling it these days. And on Instagram, I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. I had to remember that for a second, but mainly just leave messages right here on YouTube. Talking about ESPN and the fact that, well, it's time to turn the page, but honor the page it's being turned. This has been Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.